Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. Happy holidays. Happy holidays to everybody. Hope everybody's doing great. Everybody's doing fine. Hope everybody's being healthy. Taking care of your family. Taking your required medication if you need be. Sometimes we have medication that keeps us healthy and we forget to take what we're supposed to take or don't take it properly. It's very important to take your medication. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Tap in. Happy Sunday, everybody. Happy Sunday. Just wanted to tap in a little and go over a couple of things that were discussed last week that we just wanted to expound on at Progressive Action and just kind of like give a better layout of kind of what's going on and moving forward, how we have to kind of be our own watchdogs because these guys are really playing by a different set of rules. So we just kind of got to keep ourselves safe and watch each other's back and challenge any indiscrepancy that presents itself within our agency because they'll try it. They'll try it. And they have tried it, and they're continuously trying it at the expense of us, of course, right? So we want to make sure that we're just keeping all of the information constant and updates constant and just addressing really important issues that can't be swept under the rug, that are going to affect more members than less. And at some point, it will knock at your doorstep. So it's better that we all at least have these levels of communication with each other, that we establish some form of dialogue. So we're constantly just being our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. We don't have billions of dollars and thousands of lawyers to oversee the abuses that will be attempted by our agency. So, again, as always, we want to make sure we put the disclaimer that any and all of the views expressed in this live and on this channel are those opinions reflected by me and not those of the MTA, New York City Transit, Local 100, or any of their affiliates. These are solely my opinions and my views intended to provide information and guidelines in regards to circumstances that take place at our job and in our communities. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of things that I feel the Transit Authority is sweeping under the rug, that they're putting our lives in jeopardy with, and there's really no pushback on them about it. The first thing I wanted to talk about was last week, Trammell did a show. You can go on YouTube, Progressive Action TV, and watch the show. He talked about how the tests and how the union is promoting on their website the percentages of people who were testing positive, or that through aggressive testing, there were 20 people identified positive with COVID in our work environment that otherwise wouldn't have known unless they were tested through the aggressive testing measures that are being implemented through the Transit Authority. Really promoted by our union, right? So our union is pushing for more testing. More testing is a positive thing. We want to know how many people are actually positive, who's asymptomatic, who's a carrier, who's someone who's not presenting sick but actually is contagious or is sick. Those parts of it are great. The bad part is knowing is half the battle, right? So you tell me that 20 people tested positive. As Trammell touched on, well, where are these 20 people? When we discuss microclusters, when we discuss contamination, when we discuss shutting areas down, how are those areas identified? Well, they're identified by the amount of people who are actually sick at those specific locations. that information cannot be held from us. We cannot use broad spectrum numbers. In other words, you can't tell me that last week, I'm going to throw a number out there, 50 people potentially tested positive who worked at the New York City Transit Authority or at the MTA. That does nothing for us. It gives us no safety net to work from. Whereas if you look at the Department of Education, they have a mandate that they have to release the information as they get it based on microclusters. In other words, if one school has 2 positives, the school closes. Two separate positives for 2 continuous days. That school closes. So if 2 people are positive in a school building that might have several hundred people, that whole school closes down. If 14 people are positive at one depot, or 10 people or 5 people test positive through this random isolated testing, don't you think that everyone in that depot should know that 10 people tested positive in that environment? Is that like a far-fetched request? Is that like some obnoxious request to be aware that 20 people you walked past yesterday tested positive in your location? I mean, Tramel said it so eloquently. Our depots, our swing rooms, they're small communities. We have 900 people at my bus depot. We have 900 operators. How many people do 900 people affect when we consider that one person can affect 5 and 5 can affect 15 and 15 can affect 30? Are we talking about if 20 people or 10 people are positive in a specific location, that information is not made available to the people who work there? Who determines that? How the hell is it that 10, 15, 20 people can test positive in a specific location, and that location is not considered an orange zone, a yellow zone, a blue zone, whatever zones they use to determine the significance of a safety issue or an outbreak? None of that information is being given to us. Why? Because they are 100%, again, as they were doing in March, putting service over safety. Because identifying a depot as a cluster would legitimately mean that you would have to shut that depot down or quarantine half of the depot. So obviously they don't feel they should do that because it will affect the bottom line. And again, here we go. Here we go, being forced to protect ourselves. We have to become detectives. We have to become forensic experts. We have to become scientists, data specialists, to literally do our own research to identify if our location of work is a microcluster. And if that is the case, then what course of action do we have to take against that? If I know for sure that 10 people tested positive where I work, how does that affect me going back into that building? What is being done? Currently, they're actually in the process of trying to remove services and remove benefits and remove protections to get more money back. How the hell is it we do not know? How is it not a mandate that every single employee who works for the New York City Transit Authority is made aware of every, not specific person, the amount, the totals of that specific work location? If you work in subways and 7 people from that swing room tested positive, don't you think everything in that swing room and everything within 500 feet of it should be identified as a biohazard? Our fight is not with good judgment. Our fight is with people who are disingenuous and not transparent. Wherever something is not transparent, I assure you, the reason why it's not transparent is because there's something to hide. If you're not forthcoming, if you're not forthright, if you're not transparent, if you don't fully disclose information, if you omit that information, it's because you have something to hide. Why wouldn't you want the people who work here to know how many people tested positive? I don't need to know their name. I don't need to know where they live. I don't even need to know their route, their run. You can do that privately, respectfully. I need to know that tomorrow when I walk into work or today when I walk into work, that location had 23 people who tested positive for COVID and didn't have any symptoms. Don't you think that's alarming? Don't you think that is hugely alarming? Bigly, as the current president would say. They have made a commitment. Yes, Mr. Thompson, service over safety. They have made a commitment. It is their agenda now to make sure service at any cost. And we have to continuously keep talking about this because as employees, we have to band together and move collectively and understand this. It's why we keep having to make these lives and have these conversations with each other. We have to be in unison in understanding that they are not going to protect us. They're not going to protect us. They don't care. They care about that dollar. They are not going to compromise service if that even means lying to you about the place that you work. The governor, let's start at the top. This guy shuts down every business in every part of the city. Every company, every hot dog stand, every school, every bar, red zone, green zone, hot zone, fire zone. Facts matter. Facts matter. Data matters. Testing, 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 testing. That is his mantra. Let's test, test, test. Find these clusters, isolate them, and aggressively fix those clusters so that we can then move forward and we don't have to condemn a whole neighborhood. What if that whole neighborhood is the bus depot? And then it goes back to the magic question. Where is the people who are entrusted with protecting you with this information? I mean, let's call a spade a spade. UFT. Before they put any of their employees back into a school building, said, as that data comes in, we don't trust the government. We don't trust none of you. UFT said, you're going to tell us everything as you get it real time. Actually, they mandated that the mayor create a hotline and a task force to address anybody who was tested positive, and then those would be addressed real time. Real time. But I guess on our end, in our agency, at our departments, the company that lost more lives than any other agency in this country, the agency and the service that we provide or service has lost more employees than any other company in the country and potentially in the world. Facts matter. So wouldn't you think that in a place that wiped out 140 people within the course of 3 months would take greater concern about microclusters and positives that are coming from asymptomatic employees? Wouldn't that be so alarming that a place that lost more people than anywhere else in the bus depots have people testing positive who are showing no signs? 20 people, 14 people. How many of those people were at one location? Right, Tramel. So specifically in bus depots, the infection rate should be tied to correct. How are we using Metro North, Long Island Railroad, everybody who works in corporate, everybody who's employed by the MTA as a foundation of what our positivity rate is? And how is the union championing that we have a lower positivity rate than the rest of average New York City? What does that even mean? Even when 140 people died from New York City Transit alone, those amount of people didn't die from Metro North. There weren't those casualties in Long Island Railroad. Those casualties were isolated to New York City Transit, specifically bus depots, specifically train stations, specifically conductors, specifically the 5 boroughs. They talk about how a specific demographic is impacted at a greater rate than the rest of our country's demographic. So let's not parse words from the governor himself in his ambitions to neutralize, sterilize, or vaccinate minorities at a faster rate, identifying that they became sick and died at a larger rate than any other part of our population, black and brown. Black and Hispanic people died at a faster, larger rate than the rest of the country. Well, then who the hell do you think works alongside of you? Westchester was ground zero, right? I mean, it started allegedly in Westchester in the States and then ran through, our agencies, right? I mean, the governor talked about the airport and how relevant it was to what? I didn't see 140 people die from JetBlue. I didn't see 140 people die at sanitation. I didn't see 140 people die from NYPD, corrections, DOE. No, they died here. You know why they died here? Because here is where they hide the information. Here is where they lie to you. All those other agencies actually have stopgaps to protect their workers from dying. Here they said, we need to maintain service. That's why 140 people died here and nowhere else. Don't be naive. Don't be naive. It could be the difference between you being alive or dead. Do not be naive. Be unified in identifying criminality. Don't parse words. Don't make excuses. They're lying to you. They're hiding the information to make sure you still come to work. They're hiding the information because they know if the general public was aware that 20 people who left out with a bus are going to be driving a bus and are positive on that line, those people are not going to ride the bus, they're not going to ride the train, and they're not going to ever come back to the system. ShopRite gave their workers hazard pay. Yes, they did. And look, we're not even greedy. We're so indoctrinated that we just say, hey, we just want a mask. Can we get a mask, please? Can I please get something to wipe the steering wheel down, please? So that I don't have to buy it myself, please? Think about that lot. Think about that mindset. Think about who is ill-affected by this. They told you who's ill-affected by this. They told you who gets sicker and who dies at a larger rate than the rest of the population. Ask yourself when you look in the mirror, do you represent that synopsis? Do you reflect that position? when you look in the mirror, when you look at your children, when you look at your spouse, are you guys the burden bearers of COVID? And if so, then shouldn't you have greater protections? Shouldn't you have larger amounts of stopgaps to protect the most vulnerable? The most vulnerable. You said it, not me. I didn't even know. You gave that data, Governor Cuomo. You said it. You said when we vaccinate you, we have to identify the people who are ill-affected by this pandemic the worst. But yet, you steal our health care, our child care provision. You reclassify us. You lie to us about positivity rates. You use the union. You use the union, who is tasked to protect its members, to actually lie to the members. You use the union as the Trojan horse. People say they can't understand. This is not okay. This is not reasonable. This is not safe. You cannot tell the rest of the world, the country, and every other agency except ours that this thing is the real deal. Then they took the governor to court about religious freedom and their right to assemble regardless of the pandemic. So now every church and every religious faction that our buses drive through will have people who just came from a congregation of 500, 1,000, 8,000, 3,000, however many, who are going to travel on our buses, our trains, our grocery stores. So it's going to get worse, but yet we're not going to know how many people at our work location are sick, positive, that Joe, John, Peter, Paul, Mary, Kate, I don't know a name. I just want a number. Then what? Then what do we do? The only way we, New York City Transit, are going to survive this pandemic is if we collectively, as members, put ourselves first. We can no longer put the MTA first. We can't trust them. Don't trust them. I promise you they're lying to you, to me, to us. They selectively chose specific members to kick them off of FMLA and close their accounts unlawfully. Think about that. Think about that they selectively identify specific members and close their FMLA accounts unlawfully in the hopes that the members would just go along with it and resubmit paperwork to make it harder for you to use your benefit. Think about that. They want to make it harder for you to get protected. They want to make it harder for you to take care of a sick loved one. They want to make it harder. Your employer, the people you work for, want to make it harder for you to take care of someone in your house who might be dying of cancer. They want to make it harder for you to take care of a sick loved one who could be dying at home. They want to make it harder for you to provide that care. Think about that. They want to make it harder. And in that process, in doing so, they are breaking the law. But who's holding them accountable? When you look at you know, I just there's so many levels and layers to everything that there are punitive penalties. There are penalties for everything that they're doing, and they're huge. You know, offenses that include the intent to sell, transfer, or use individually identifiable health information for commercial advantage, personal gain, or malicious harm can result in fines of $250,000 and up to 10 years in prison. So work partners and the MTA, it is very clear that you understand, that we understand, these are the consequences for what you're doing. Offenses that include the intent, the willingness, the wanting to sell, transfer, or use individually identifiable health information for commercial advantage, personal gain, or malicious harm. Those three words, personal gain, malicious harm, or commercial advantage. All three of those. Commercial advantage is considered availability, if you want to know. It is an advantage to their bottom line, a commercial gain. They make money if you come to work, regardless of whether or not they violate your rights. Personal gain. The personal gain is the profit sharing between the union and the MTA. Personal gain. The third, malicious harm. Malicious harm. Malicious harms, malice, without care, intentional. So when someone tells you your account was closed, you say, how is that possible? They say, well, we just did it. That is malicious because it caused harm to you. It is without regard. It is malicious. It is malice. So those three, the penalty for that is $250,000 per instance, per accusation, and up to 10 years in prison. So I'm asking, who closed my account? Who closed my coworkers' accounts? Because I've spoken to hundreds already in direct message about people who have had themselves disenfranchised, marginalized, and identified. Remember what it says. Individually identifiable health information. So how would they know which accounts to close? They closed the family member's care? Remember, I have two accounts, one for myself, one for a family member. How is it that the family member was closed and not mine? Here's how, because the family member does not apply to sick rules at transit, whereas the ones for yourself, all sick rules are still applicable. So therefore, they're not going to close that one because you're still mandated by the rules and regulations of the transit authority and your contract. Whereas the one for family goes straight to the federal and they have no control over that. So that's the one transit wants to circumvent. That's the one they want you to stop being able to use because they can't control you with that one. So just magically, those were the ones that were all closed? So, we're going to stay kicking it. We're going to stay communicating with you. Just know that we're not waiting. And I think this theme, you guys got to start really taking to heart and understanding. Don't let the union, don't let the MTA, don't let the governor, don't let anyone lie to you and say this is political and say this is individual attacks against certain people. No, this is illegal activity. This is criminality. Being identified by members who are willing to challenge the status quo. How do you think anything has ever been achieved in the course of history? Because there are people who intend to disenfranchise you. There are people who want to marginalize you and suppress you and keep you quiet. So they do things to continuously do that. And the only thing that power respects is a condemnation of that power. We refuse to be victims or victimized when we have fought for decades, even centuries, to have equal footing, to have standards. You don't get the luxury to violate those standards because you want service, because you want to make money, because when you look at me, the reflection that comes back at you is someone who's a second-class citizen in your world. Well, I'm not afraid of you. We're not afraid of you. Progressive action. It requires action. Progressive, forward moving, not stagnant. We don't sit around and wait for you to condemn us. We don't sit around and wait for you to lie to us. No, we identify the lie and then we put in the action. We bring it right to the people, real time, direct. There's a cluster, a microcluster of criminality. There are microclusters of lies. There are microclusters of yellow unionism. There are microclusters of everything going on here that needs to be confronted, addressed, and we need to be protected against it. There are things on the books that protect us. So it shouldn't even be this much of a fight. Let's be clear. There are stopgaps present currently today that all could have been implemented throughout the course of this pandemic. UFT did it. NYPD did it. The teachers wasn't having it. They said, I dare you. We'll take the Taylor law and deliver it to the mayor's doorstep. That's what they said. I dare you. Don't tell me about a contract. The Taylor law is only effective to contractual bargaining. This isn't a job action. This is a human life action. This is a safety issue. This is a life and death issue. This isn't, I don't want another $3 in my contract. I want a better doctor. This is, I don't want to go home and kill everybody in my house. I have a right to know that when I go to work, what I'm bringing home or walking into is not going to be a firestorm. That's not luxury information. That's not information that only the top 4 in the union should be privy to, or a VP should be privy to, or Sarah Feinberg should be privy to, or the governor should be privy to. Every person who works there has a public, a civil, a human right to know that wherever they are walking into every day, that 20, 30, or 40 people have contracted something that can wipe them off the face of this earth. That is not subjective. That is not opinionated. That is not political. That is right and wrong. That is just or unjust. That is malicious, willful. Y'all have a great day. I got to go drive a bus. We all we got. Take care of yourselves.